Police try to arrest black FBI agent. 7 minutes later, what happens leaves everyone speechless. It took 7 minutes to undo a lifetime of discipline and to prove it had all been worth it. Julian McCall, a seasoned FBI agent, walks into a corporate lobby for a routine meeting. He's dressed in a suit, speaking calmly through a Bluetooth earpiece. Within moments, he's mistaken for a threat. A call is made. Police arrive. No questions are asked. Before we start the story, write in the comments from which part of the world you're watching today. The man wasn't pacing. He wasn't agitated. He wasn't shouting or tapping or bothering anyone. He was standing near the lobby directory with one hand in his pocket and a small black earpiece in his right ear, talking quietly to someone she couldn't hear. That was it. That was all it took. Tara glanced at the digital clock on the reception desk. 3 minutes past 10. She adjusted her blazer and peeked over the desk again. The man hadn't moved much, just shifted his weight once or twice, said something under his breath, nodded perhaps to himself. His face was unreadable, professional, almost too professional. He was tall, athletic, well-dressed, dark navy suit, crisp collar, brown leather shoes that looked polished that morning, a matching brown belt, a brushed metal watch, no ring. If anything, he looked like someone important, but something about him made her uneasy, and she hated herself for not knowing exactly what. The earpiece. That stupid little earpiece. It made him seem like he was listening to someone, but not her, not them, not this space. And he hadn't come to her desk. He hadn't introduced himself. He hadn't even smiled. She leaned toward the internal phone slowly and picked it up. "Security," she said into the receiver, lowering her voice. "There's a man in the lobby. He's just standing there, talking to someone. I don't know. Something's off." On the other side of the lobby, Julian McCall ended his call with a soft tap of the earpiece. "Copy that. I'll brief her when she arrives," he said, barely audible to anyone nearby. He glanced up at the elevator panel. All the floors were still red. He took one small step to the side, closer to the plaque that read, Suite 22, Rhodes Consulting Group. He had arrived exactly 9 minutes early as usual. He always gave himself time to scan the environment, study exits, clock the movements of building staff. This wasn't paranoia. It was habit, training, and lately, necessity. His phone vibrated. He didn't take it out. He knew the pattern. His supervisor was likely en route. Behind the desk, Tara hung up and frowned. She hated moments like this, the long, slow ones that made you doubt yourself. She wanted to believe she was being cautious, that if anything really were wrong, she'd acted quickly. But part of her already suspected what the man might say, that he was waiting for someone, that he belonged there. She decided not to approach. He didn't look like he wanted to be approached. A small red light blinked on the side of his earpiece. She tensed, and that's when the two officers entered. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the wall." Julian turned. The officer, male, late 30s, squared shoulders, a faint southern accent, had one hand resting near his belt. The second officer, a woman, stood just behind him. Julian tilted his head slightly. His hands were still in full view. "May I ask what this is about?" "You match a report we received. Suspicious activity in the lobby." Julian blinked, then slowly pulled a small leather case from his inner jacket pocket. "My name is Julian McCall. I'm here on official business. I'm a federal agent. Here's my identification." The male officer didn't take it. "You'll need to set that down, on the floor." "I'd rather you look at it," Julian said, still calm, still firm. The officer stepped closer. "I said set it down, sir." Julian's jaw tightened. He crouched slightly, lowered the ID case onto the marble floor, and straightened again. Tara rose halfway from her chair. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of elevator cables and distant office chatter above. "Do you have any weapons on you?" the officer asked. "I do. Standard service issue. It's registered and holstered. I am not under any obligation to surrender it unless—" The officer cut him off. "Sit down. Right here. Cross your legs." Julian stared. A pause. Then slowly he obeyed. He sat on the floor, in a business suit, in the middle of a lobby filled with security cameras and confused bystanders on the upper floor mezzanine. He said nothing more. In the control room, a guard reviewed footage. Upstairs, someone dialed their boss. On the mezzanine, a woman recorded 30 seconds of video. And in the elevator, between floors 14 and ground, Agent Jennifer Rhodes looked at her watch. She was late by 4 minutes. Her phone had no signal. And when the doors opened, everything changed. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Jennifer Rhodes stepped out, tapping the side of her phone as she walked. Her sharp black heels struck the marble with steady precision. She spotted the reception desk, then the officers, and then she stopped mid-stride. Julian McCall, one of her best agents, was sitting cross-legged on the floor, his palms resting lightly on his knees like a man meditating inside a burning building. Her eyes narrowed. No one noticed her yet. Not Tara, not the officers, not even Julian. She took a single breath. "Someone want to tell me," she said, her voice cutting through the space like glass, "why a federal agent is sitting on the damn floor of a lobby?" All heads turned. Julian didn't move, but his eyes flicked up, locking with hers. Calm, controlled, but burning. The male officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, we received a report of suspicious behavior." Rhodes cut him off with a raised finger. "Your name?" "Officer Denham." "And yours?" she asked, turning to the woman. "Officer Reyes." Rhodes shifted her weight, keeping her voice level. "Did either of you verify his credentials?" Denham stiffened. "He claimed to be FBI. But anyone can say that. We were following protocol." Rhodes stepped forward, retrieving Julian's ID case from the ground. She flipped it open with one hand and raised an eyebrow. Then she looked back at Denham. "Is this your idea of protocol?" Tara, behind the desk, was now visibly anxious. I thought maybe he was..." Rhodes didn't look at her. "You thought what?" Tara's mouth opened. No words came. "You thought a man with a Bluetooth earpiece standing still and dressed like a diplomat was suspicious? Or was it just easier to call someone and make him someone else's problem?" Denham opened his mouth, then closed it again. Reyes finally spoke, quiet but clear. "We didn't draw weapons." He complied. "No one was hurt." "You think that's the standard?" Rhodes snapped. "No one was hurt?" She knelt slightly, looking Julian in the eye now. "You good?" Julian gave a short nod. 7 minutes, he said. "That's how long I've been sitting here." Rhodes stood again. "You just sat?" Reyes asked, uncertain now. "Why didn't you?" "I said I was FBI. I showed my ID," Julian replied evenly. "Then I followed their instructions. Because I knew how this would look. Especially if I didn't." Denham glanced away. His throat shifted, like he was trying to swallow something thick. Rhodes turned to him again. "You applied for the Bureau last month, didn't you?" Denham looked up, startled. "Yes, ma'am." "Field office in Arlington?" "Yes." Rhodes folded her arms. "You know who was supposed to conduct your initial interview?" Denham didn't answer. He didn't need to. Rhodes nodded at Julian. "Him." The silence that followed was heavier than anything spoken so far. Julian stood now, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. He took back his ID. "I had your file," he said. "Read every word. You looked promising." Denham's mouth opened, but again, no words came. "You judged me in seconds," Julian continued. "Didn't even ask my name." Reyes turned slightly. "I was just trying not to escalate." Julian looked at her, and this time his voice was quieter. "And in trying not to escalate, you let it happen." Rhodes exhaled. "All right. Let's be very clear." She turned slowly, looking at all three of them. "You've got training, you've got judgment, and still, you saw a black man in a business lobby with an earpiece. And your first instinct was control, not conversation." Denham's hands curled slowly into fists, then relaxed again. Rhodes raised a finger. "No apologies yet. Not unless you mean them. Not unless you understand why." She turned back to Julian. "You want to continue with the brief?" Julian glanced toward the elevators. "Yeah, let's go." As they stepped into the lift together, Rhodes pressed the button for 22. Inside the elevator, for the first time since she arrived, Julian spoke just for her. No one in that room even noticed the bag at my feet, he said. What bag? My credentials, my files, gun permit, clearances, all sitting right there. I didn't touch it. Rhodes nodded. You knew if you bent to pick it up, it would have been over in 15 seconds instead of 7 minutes. The doors closed. The lobby vanished. Downstairs, the lobby was quiet again, but not normal. Tara sat at her desk, eyes fixed on the security feed. Reyes stood with her arms crossed, head down. Denham hadn't moved at all. He was still facing the spot on the floor where Julian had sat, as if trying to imagine what it felt like. The elevator doors shut with a soft hiss, muffling the chaos below. For a few seconds, Julian let the silence hold. Agent Rhodes didn't speak. Neither did he. That was the difference between fieldwork and everything else. Some silences weren't empty. They were full. Rhodes finally broke it. I shouldn't have been late. Julian didn't look at her. You weren't the problem. I still should have been there. He turned his head slightly. Would it have changed what they saw when they looked at me? Rhodes was quiet for a moment, then nodded once. No. The elevator stopped at the 22nd floor. When the doors opened, the air was different. Quieter, more professional. Glass walls, clean lines, an assistant typing somewhere in the distance. Julian straightened his suit, adjusted the cuff of his left sleeve. His badge was back in his pocket. They walked together down a short hallway. At the conference room, Rhodes gestured toward the door, then paused. You sure you want to keep this meeting? Julian didn't hesitate. Always. They stepped in. Meanwhile, back in the lobby, Denham was still frozen. Tara had sat back down and was pretending to work, but her hands hovered above the keyboard, unmoving. She'd replayed her phone call to security in her head at least 4 times. She couldn't remember exactly what she'd said, only how certain she'd been. She could still hear the words, "There's a man in the lobby. He's just standing there." She hadn't said black man. She told herself that again and again. But somehow she knew that didn't absolve her. Reyes broke the silence first. He didn't raise his voice. Denham didn't respond. He didn't challenge us. Didn't reach for anything. Didn't even argue. Still nothing. Reyes turned toward him. You realize what just happened? He finally looked at her. I just tanked my chance at the bureau, he said. His voice was flat, lifeless. Reyes frowned. That's not what I meant. Denham stared at the floor. You think I didn't know who he might be? He walked in like he owned the room. That's what threw me. Reyes blinked. Threw you? I kept thinking, he can't be just a guy with a meeting. Not looking like that. Not talking like that. Reyes shook her head. You just described confidence. That's what we're trained to have. And now you're saying it's suspicious? He didn't look nervous. Most people look nervous around cops. Reyes narrowed her eyes. You think confidence is guilt now? Denham exhaled sharply and rubbed the back of his neck. I don't know what I think. Tara's voice almost a whisper. He was standing right by the directory. I didn't even ask his name. The silence that followed was heavier than the last. Denham leaned back against the wall. I keep telling myself I'm not that guy, he said. I joined the force to be better. But maybe I've just never been tested before. Reyes sat down on the edge of the reception counter, arms folded. You have now, she said, and you failed. Denham didn't argue. I wasn't much better, she added. I watched. I kept telling myself I was keeping things calm, but what I was really doing was waiting to be told what to think. 20 floors above, Julian was briefing a group of executives about cyber protocols and internal threats. His voice was clear, focused, not a hint of what had happened just minutes earlier. Rhodes sat silently at the far end of the table, letting him lead. To them, he was just another agent, another suit with another set of slides. And that was the point, because he was, no less, no more, until someone decided otherwise. After the meeting, as they walked back to the elevator, Rhodes looked at him again. You handled that well. Julian didn't smile. I didn't do it for them. I know. You think Denham's still downstairs? I do. Julian pressed the call button. Good. Back in the lobby, the officers still hadn't left. Denham stood near the wall now, arms crossed, jaw clenched like a man waiting for a verdict. Reyes sat in the corner, scrolling through policies on her phone. Tara was no longer pretending to type. When the elevator dinged, they all looked up. Julian stepped out alone. He looked directly at Denham. "You still want that interview?" Denham nodded. "Once." Julian reached into his pocket and handed him a folded page. "Those are the questions I was going to ask you," he said. "No answers. Just the questions." Denham took the page slowly. Julian paused, then added, "If you can answer them honestly, not to me, but to yourself, maybe you still have a shot. But don't expect me to do the work for you." Denham swallowed hard. I'm sorry," he said quietly. Julian looked at him. Not angry, not forgiving, just measured. "Don't say it to me," he said. "Say it to whoever you become next." Then he walked past him and out through the front doors, into the sunlight. Denham sat in the squad car without turning the key. The page Julian had given him lay on the passenger seat. 8 printed questions, spaced evenly, like a formal document, the kind used for field interviews. No extra marks, no annotations. He read the first question again. "Describe a situation where your assumptions led you to make the wrong judgment. What did you learn, and how did you change afterward?" He didn't have an answer. Not yet. Upstairs, Agent Rhodes sat at her desk with her jacket off, sleeves rolled back, reading over her inbox. Julian stood by the window, arms crossed. "You think he's going to be able to come back from this?" Rhodes asked, not looking up. Julian didn't answer right away. "He might," he said. "If someone holds him accountable, if someone doesn't try to cushion the landing." Rhodes glanced up. "You going to do that?" "No," Julian replied. "That's not my job." Rhodes nodded slowly. "Good." She closed her laptop. "You know what bothered me most?" Julian turned from the window. She didn't say a word. "Tara." "Yeah, that receptionist." She picked up the phone and disappeared behind protocol. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. She didn't lie. She just handed it off and then stayed quiet. Julian shrugged. "That's all it takes sometimes. She's lucky we don't file a complaint." He looked at her. "Wouldn't matter. The paperwork gets buried. The language softens it until it disappears." Rhodes raised an eyebrow. "You don't want her to face consequences?" Julian shook his head. "I want her to remember. That's harder." He turned back to the window. Consequences change resumes. Regret changes people. Reyes stood outside the precinct, smoking a cigarette she didn't even like. It was an old habit from before the academy, long since broken. But somehow, the weight of that lobby scene had pulled it back into her hands. She kept replaying it. The man sitting on the floor, calm, straight-backed, like someone who had trained himself to be prepared for humiliation. Not because he expected it, but because he knew others might. She hadn't drawn her weapon. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't touched him, and she still felt guilty. Not because of what she did, but because of what she didn't. That was the cost of assumptions. Not always the mistake itself, but the silence that let it stand unchallenged. She took another drag, then dropped the cigarette, grinding it out under her heel. Then she went back inside. That evening in her office, Rhodes called Tara. The receptionist's voice came through the speaker. Quiet, strained. "I didn't mean any harm." Rhodes didn't soften her tone. "You didn't do anything malicious. You also didn't ask for a name, didn't offer a greeting, didn't follow standard procedure. You acted on discomfort, not information." "I know," Tara said. I know that now." Rhodes leaned forward. "You know what bothers me most?" Tara waited. "You have no idea how close that man came to being killed, and you're still trying to convince me that your intentions were enough." Silence. Rhodes didn't fill it. After a long pause, Tara spoke again. "What do you want me to do?" Rhodes answered without hesitation. "Learn, remember, and never let silence feel like the safe choice again." She ended the call. Outside the building, night had fallen. Julian stood at a nearby bench under the dim glow of a street lamp, watching traffic roll past. For a few moments, everything looked normal. Pedestrians walked with coffee. A couple argued quietly. Two kids raced each other to a bus stop. The world hadn't changed. But something inside it had. Reyes approached. She looked tired. Not physically. Something deeper. "I didn't come to say sorry," she said. Julian nodded. "Good. I came to say I'm rereading the code. All of it." "Good," he repeated. "That's where it starts." She hesitated. "I kept thinking that saying nothing was safe, neutral. But now I see it's a choice," Julian finished. "Every silence is a choice." Reyes looked down. Julian handed her a second sheet of paper, identical to the one Denham received. "This is what I give every applicant," he said. "You're not applying, but the questions still matter." She took it, read the first line, then looked back up at him. "Why give this to me?" "Because you asked," Julian said simply. "That's more than most do." She stood there for a moment longer, then nodded once and left. Denham sat alone at his kitchen table. The page was in front of him. His name wasn't on it. It could have been anyone's. That was the point. He read each question slowly, then a second time, then a third, and then he picked up a pen. The next morning, the lobby was quiet. Same polished floors, same soft hum of artificial light, same front desk. But something had changed. Or rather, someone had. Julian McCall stepped through the rotating doors once more. He wasn't here for a meeting. He wasn't carrying a briefing file. There was no earpiece in his ear today, no suit, just dark slacks, a pressed shirt, and the badge clipped to his belt, clearly visible. He saw Tara as soon as he entered. She stood when she recognized him. "Agent McCall," she said quickly. Julian gave a small nod. "I wasn't sure you'd come back," she added. "I wasn't sure either." They stood in silence for a few moments. "I read the policy manual last night," she said. "I stayed until 3. I've never read it cover to cover before." "Most people haven't," Julian replied. "That's not the problem. The problem is how often people think they don't need to." Tara looked down, then back up. "I filed a formal statement. No one told me to. I just thought, if the record's going to be incomplete, at least let my part be honest." Julian studied her, then nodded once. "That's a start." She sat back down slowly. He didn't offer forgiveness. She didn't ask for it. It was better that way. Outside, across the street, Reyes and Denham waited near the steps. Denham wore civilian clothes today. His badge was still clipped to his waistband, but it looked different now, like something earned rather than assumed. Reyes spoke first. "I didn't expect him to come back." "He shouldn't have to," Denham replied. "No, but I'm glad he did." Julian crossed the street and stopped a few feet away from them. Reyes stepped forward. "I've been thinking about something you said yesterday." Julian said nothing. "That silence is a choice," she continued. "I've been silent a lot. At home, at work, in training. I always thought I was avoiding conflict, but I think I was just avoiding the mirror." Julian nodded. "And now?" "I'm not sure yet, but I'm not done." He looked at Denham next. "You write your answers?" Denham held up a folder. "Typed, triple-checked. I don't know if I got them right, but they're real." Julian took the folder, didn't open it, just held it. "You want to be in the bureau?" he asked. "I do," Denham said. "Now more than ever." "Then here's the bad news," Julian said quietly. "You don't get to forget what you did yesterday. Not ever. It's part of your story now. But here's the good news. It doesn't have to be the end of it." Denham nodded slowly. "Thank you for not throwing it away." Julian looked at him, serious. "I almost did." Another pause. "Take that as a warning, not a compliment." Denham looked down. "Understood." Julian turned to leave, but paused. "You know what 7 minutes feels like, Denham?" Denham nodded. "Too long." "No," Julian said. "Exactly long enough to decide who you are." Later that afternoon, Julian stood in the hallway of the field office. Agent Rhodes approached, holding a file. "I read Denham's responses," she said. "They're raw, a little defensive, but he's learning." "Learning doesn't excuse damage," Julian said. No, Rhodes agreed, but it means he might not do it again, which is more than we can say for a lot of people. Julian leaned against the wall. You ever think we're just putting out spot fires while the whole building smolders? Rhodes raised an eyebrow. You ever think a building can burn quietly for years until someone finally stops pretending the smoke is just fog? He smirked. First time in days. You staying late tonight? She asked. No, he said. I've got somewhere to be. She didn't ask where. That evening, Julian sat at a small community center auditorium, dressed casually, watching as a group of cadets finished a workshop on bias and ethics. He wasn't there to speak. He was just observing. In the corner, Denham and Reyes were seated in the back row, listening, learning, doing the part no one claps for. Outside, the street was empty, the kind of quiet you notice only after you've lived through noise. Julian stepped outside and stood under a street lamp. A boy passed by on a scooter and looked up at him. Mister, are you a cop? Julian smiled. Sort of. The boy nodded solemnly. Cool. Then he rolled off. Julian looked down at the badge on his belt. Still there, still his. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just walked on.